It wasn't just the 30 acres of fertile soil they sold. It was 30 years of my life, the heart of my family's legacy, traded for sterile, cookie-cutter mansions and a golf course view. I stared at the legal notice, the thin paper trembling in my hand, confirming that the Bramblewood Homeowners Association, led by the perpetually polished Brenda, had secretly signed away the last accessible corner of our property to the developers. Seriously, how could they do this? The betrayal was so sharp it felt like a physical blow to the chest, leaving me breathless in the humid Florida air that now smelled less of jasmine and more of raw concrete dust. The conflict wasn't just about land. It was about the fundamental arrogance of people who believed their perfectly manicured lawns somehow gave them dominion over the earth beneath them. My family had farmed this land since the 50s, a pocket of real, messy life surrounded by rising tide of faux Mediterranean stucco. But when the Bramblewood Homeowners Association expanded 5 years ago, they bought up the adjoining field and immediately started sending me aggressive, passive-aggressive letters about my unacceptable farm aesthetic and the unpleasant sounds of animal husbandry. Brenda, their elected tyrant, a woman whose smile was as tight and merciless as the facelift she'd clearly purchased, would drive her white Escalade down the temporary access road, pausing just long enough to shoot me a withering glance over her expensive sunglasses. Every interaction was a masterclass in condescension. "Alara," she'd once chirped, her voice thin and crystalline. "We just need you to understand that this community has standards. Your compost pile is affecting the property values of $1.5 million homes. Can't you see that?" I remember standing there, the grit of freshly turned earth coating my boots, trying to swallow the sudden surge of rage. Did she really think a few rotting vegetables were worse than the constant, grating roar of her landscaper's leaf blower at 7 a.m.? The constant noise had replaced the comforting rhythm of the cicadas. The peaceful scent of blooming lavender was now lost beneath the synthetic fumes of pesticide trucks. I took a deep, shuddering breath, a sound that felt more like a slow, heavy sigh of resignation. They had slowly, systematically squeezed the life out of the farm, and now they had taken the final piece, the northern access strip, ensuring the developers could build right up to my porch, boxing me in completely. I couldn't sleep for weeks. The sound of distant hammering was a relentless reminder of my powerlessness. I spent my days hunched over county plat maps, coffee staining the old blueprints, searching for anything. A flicker of hope, a tiny, rusted key to a massive locked door. And then there it was, a detail so archaic, so overlooked in the developer's haste and the HOA's self-assured entitlement, that it made my heart hammer a frantic, exhilarating rhythm against my ribs. The main artery road, the only asphalt access point leading into the entire sprawling Bramblewood community, the road they called Founder's Way, was not, legally, part of the HOA's deeded common property. It had been an old, forgotten municipal road easement that was never officially relinquished to the Homeowners Association or the developers, but simply used by them when the development was initially plotted 30 years ago. It was a 25-foot wide strip, connecting the public highway directly to the gates of their wealthy enclave, and it was still technically private, unassigned land, subject to an auction for outstanding property taxes. Wait, are you telling me the access to their entire neighborhood is a legal ghost? The realization hit me like a shot of pure adrenaline. They had been so focused on acquiring my farmland for expansion that they had neglected the very foundation of their community access. The irony was sweet enough to taste. I hired the best, most discreet land attorney in the county, a man who looked like he'd rather be fishing, but whose mind was sharper than a surgical scalpel. We worked in silence for 2 months. The paperwork was thick, dense, and exhilarating. On a Tuesday afternoon, after a tense 2-hour hearing, the deed to that entire 25-foot strip, Founder's Way, was legally transferred. The price? A fraction of what they'd paid for my farmland. The feeling? Priceless. I didn't waste a minute. I rented 2 massive, non-negotiable concrete barrier blocks, the kind used for highway construction. Then, I purchased a dozen bright red industrial traffic cones. Early the next morning, before the commuter rush, I drove my old diesel pickup to the entrance of Bramblewood. The HOA's elaborate wrought iron gate, flanked by pristine flower beds, looked impossibly smug. I carefully parked the truck, directed the delivery driver, and watched with a slow, deeply satisfying burn as the massive concrete blocks were lowered into place, completely sealing off the only way in or out of Founder's Way. A small, official-looking sign was screwed onto the nearest barrier: private property, no access. The first homeowners association resident to find the new arrangement was a man in an impeccably pressed suit, stuck behind the barriers, laying on his horn like an angry, bewildered goose. But then the main event arrived. Brenda's white Escalade screeched to a halt behind the growing line of furious commuters. She stormed out, phone already pressed to her ear, her face blotchy with fury. She marched right up to the barrier where I was sitting calmly in my pickup, sipping coffee. "What in God's name is the meaning of this, Ilara? You can't just block a public street," she shrieked, her voice losing its polished composure. I took a slow sip of my coffee, the warm, earthy aroma a stark contrast to her synthetic perfume. "It's not a public street, Brenda. Not anymore," I said, my voice steady. "Check the county records. I bought it. It's private property now, and I'm exercising my right to deny access." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "You bought it? That's impossible. The Homeowners Association has an easement." "You had a handshake and an assumption, Brenda. You spent so much time worrying about my compost pile, you forgot to secure your own front door?" I retorted, watching the color drain from her face as she realized the true, chilling depth of the problem. What were they going to do now? The developers couldn't bring in materials, the residents couldn't leave for work, and the entire high-priced community was trapped, all because of a tiny, forgotten piece of paper. The look on her face, that entitled shock turning to cold, sick panic, was absolute, unadulterated justice. The next few weeks were a glorious, chaotic blur of emergency homeowners association meetings, frantic calls to high-priced lawyers, and reporters swarming the blockade. The homeowners association tried injunctions, threats, and even a ridiculous attempt to appeal to the spirit of neighborly cooperation. But the paperwork was airtight. They had screwed me out of my farmland. I had legally boxed in their entire community. The developers abandoned the project, refusing to continue without clear access, and the property values of Bramblewood plummeted faster than a lead balloon. Eventually, the Homeowners Association had to come to me, hat in hand, offering to buy the strip of land back at 10 times the market rate, plus a generous settlement for the original farm betrayal. I took the money, of course, and used it to buy a new, much larger, and much more private farm miles away. But the true victory wasn't the cash. It was watching the powerful, the entitled, and the self-serving finally face the consequences of their own short-sighted greed. It was a loud, clear message carried on the wind. You can't sacrifice other people's foundation for your own convenience without eventually crumbling yourself.